Okay, on to proteins. Proteins are super awesome and super important for the body. They have a variety of functions. Basically, everything in your body is carried out by a protein. More on that in the future, but that's food for thought. Proteins, as you already know, are Chan elements. They can also contain sulfur too, so they're actually Chan's elements. And the picture in the top right of the screen there is actually a protein. So that's what proteins look like. They're all folded up and they're wild and crazy and they have a 3D structure. Proteins are incredibly important. Some of the functions of proteins are movement. So think about your muscles. Proteins are muscles, and you know that. In order to move, you have to be able to contract and release your muscles. Proteins are also part of structure of the body. For example, are made into keratin or collagen. Collagen is in your skin, and keratin is in your hair and nails. Both proteins that relate to structure. Proteins are also enzymes, so they are actually involved in biochemical reactions. Enzymes, you've probably learned before, are molecules that speed up chemical reactions. So biochemical reactions require enzymes. Proteins are also responsible for transport. Proteins are found in the cell membrane, and that's how they're involved in transport. They transport molecules across the cell membrane that normally couldn't go across it. And the last thing is regulation. Proteins are involved in all kinds of different functions in the body, and those are just a few. The monomer proteins are amino acids. Each bead on this little chain here represents an amino acid. ASN is, I'm not 100% sure, but GLY is glycine. PHE is phenylalanine. GLU is glutamate. GLN is glutamic acid. ALA is alanine. Those are all different types of amino acids, and they are attached together to make a polypeptide or a protein. Amino acids have a really specific structure. They're made up of three parts. The first part is the amino group, and the amino group is made up of NH2, and you will be expected to know that, so you need to memorize that. The other side of the molecule is called a carboxyl group. It's C double bound to an O and an OH. So sometimes you'll see the carboxyl group referred to as this, COOH. That's a carboxyl group, C double bound to O and an OH. The last part of the amino acid is this thing right here, which is the R group. That's a variable group. If you would look at the periodic table, you'd realize that there's no R on the periodic table. That's because that R means rest of the molecule. So you could have all kinds of different options here. You could simply just have an H, like a hydrogen, or you could have rings, or you could have sulfur, you could have all kinds of other things going on there. The type of variable group that an amino acid has dictates what amino acid you're looking at. So valine is going to have a different R group than, let's say, methionine, and so on and so forth. So you can see in this picture here, the variable groups are highlighted in blue, so you can just see how many different options there are. Glycine is simply an H, alanine is a CH3, but then you get to valine and leucine and isoleucine. They're all so complicated with the way that they have the carbons bound together. So the polypeptide is the polymer of proteins, and this is a polypeptide right here. And the polypeptide is actually held together by bonds. Those are the bonds in the polypeptide. We call those peptide bonds. Peptide bonds. That's why this whole thing's called a polypeptide, because it has many peptide bonds. How many how many monomer amino acids are here in this protein? I have 1, I have 2, I have 3, 4, and 5. I have 5 different amino acids in this polypeptide. Again, they're held together by peptide bonds. Oops, there we are. Peptide bonds are right there in between amino acids. They're extremely important. And I'm slowly labeling the amino acids of this polypeptide. So some examples of proteins that you have in your body, of course, are skin. Skin is just collagen. You can see in the picture here that younger skin has nice and bright and spongy collagen, but as you get older, your collagen starts to fall apart. That's why you get wrinkles as you get old. Keratin makes up your hair and nails, so they're actually both the same type of protein. The structure is just a little different between the two. Another protein is called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is incredibly important in your red blood cells because it has iron in it, and it carries around oxygen because Iron has a high affinity, which means it really likes oxygen, so it carries it around the body. And the last example of of a protein would be pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme in your stomach that helps you break down your food. So how do proteins work? How is it that they can do so many different functions? Proteins are dependent on their 3D shape. The 3D shape is the absolute most important thing for protein function. If the shape is improper, then the protein cannot function the way it should. So, for example, if you have insulin protein that your body can't actually recognize, that could be because the insulin or the receptors on your cell surface actually don't recognize that insulin. That's what causes diabetes. If your proteins or your enzymes in your body get to too high of a temperature, a process called denaturation happens. You can see denaturation here is when a protein loses its shape. If it loses its shape, it loses its function. The functional protein here has a specific shape, but when denaturation occurs, the protein falls apart. And you can see that in this picture here. There's no structure to this protein. It has fallen apart. That's called denaturation. An example of how protein shape is so important for its function has to do with a disease called sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia causes low blood cell count. It also causes your body not to be able to hold as much oxygen as it possibly should. This is caused by a misshaped hemoglobin protein. You can see in the picture at the bottom right, this hemoglobin right here has been misshaped, so it doesn't look like what the normal hemoglobin looks like. And some of you may say, I don't really see that difference there. Well, there's a huge difference, and that huge difference actually totally changes the ability of sickle cell blood cells to be able to hold oxygen the way they should. And this is actually caused by just a few incorrect amino acids, which cause the proteins to fold incorrectly. And what happens then is we have this sickle shape of this red blood cell versus where it should normally be at this normal shape right here with the concave center. That sickling of the blood cells actually causes more normal blood cells to burst, and it causes all kinds of problems for the individual with sickle cell anemia. Okay, finally, our last group of macromolecules are the nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are somewhat boring, even though they're incredibly important, because all they do really is store genetic information. They're also responsible for moving that genetic information around, but that's about it. The cell basically really focuses on nucleic acids to be like the leaders of the cell because they control the DNA. Nucleic acids contain the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So these would be CHOMP elements. And the monomer of nucleic acids is a nucleotide, and the polymer is a nucleic acid. And of course, there's two types of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. So if you're looking at these molecules here, one of them on the left is RNA. The one on the right is actually DNA. RNA and DNA are just a touch different because RNA has one strand to it, and DNA actually has two. So you can actually see this on the picture here. This is just one half of a DNA strand, but it's actually an RNA molecule. So the DNA, which is the full polymer, has a double helix. It's got two sets of repeating nucleotide structures, and there's the nucleotide structure. Okay, there's a couple more checkpoint questions here. At this point, pause the video, so hang on for a second and try to answer the questions. When you're ready, start the video again and I'll tell you the answers. Okay, the first question says, which of the following pairs is correct? We have protein to monosaccharide, protein to glycerol plus 3 fatty acids, disaccharide to polypeptide, and amino acid to polypeptide. And the answer for this one is, of course, D, amino acids. Okay, then it says, what does the diagram show to the right? The monomer of proteins, an amino acid, a carboxyl group, and an amino group. The answer to this one is D, all of the above. And that's because this right here is the amino group. This is the R group. And this is the carboxyl group. Okay, refer to the diagram below. Which letter refers to the amino group of the amino acid group? The answer to this one would be, pause the video, try it out. The answer to this one would actually be A. A is the answer. Because this right here, the NH2, is the amino group. Okay, I think might be the last question. Refer to the diagram below. Which of the following statements best describes what is being shown? A chain of amino acids is falling apart. Pause the video and try to answer the question. Okay, the answer to this one is C, denaturation of a protein and loss of function. Okay, now that you've gone through all these notes, I want you to take a second to kind of look over them or reflect upon them. And then when you're ready, you're going to take the Mastery Connect quiz that's shown there below. Now, this is only period 5 that is doing this. Period 7, you'll be doing it too, but at a different point in time. Some questions at the end of the Mastery Connect quiz actually don't have a drop down because I want you to answer those on a piece of notebook paper. It's just a couple ID things. It'll show you a picture and you'll have to identify the structure of that macromolecule that you're looking at. Make sure again that you take this seriously because we are checking your grades from this. We are checking your grades, so make sure that you are taking this seriously and doing a great job. Okay, email me with questions.